Hi guys! I'm here today to do my top 10 science fiction and fantasy reads of 2019. I look forward to doing this list every year. It is so much fun for me to look back on all the reads that I have done this year and share the highlights. I am creating two lists. I'm creating a fantasy and science fiction top 10 and then a contemporary and other book list. So there will be two. Fantasy and sci-fi will be today. Contemporary and other books will be tomorrow. So altogether, it's about 20, maybe like 22 reads. So I really hope you guys like this list. And yeah, let's get into it. So the first read I'm going to talk about, these are just in order that I read them, not in best book of, because I don't really believe in doing that. But so the first book I'm going to chat about is The Burning Maze by Rick Riordan. I went into this book a little bit hesitant because I have heard so many positive things about this book, and I was expecting it to be good. I love Rick Riordan reads. His books always make my top 10 read of the year because I love them. This book hit me on a deep emotional level that I was not emotionally prepared for. It was a rough one, guys. I'll say that. It's definitely a rough read. It deals with topics that Rick Riordan has never really put in his books before, and I was really impressed with it. I really love this series because it really looks at being a god and then not being a god in a really interesting way. I love how we got to see all the former characters in the Percy Jackson series. That was such a highlight for me, but this book really broke me emotionally. So that's why I wound up on this list. And I was happy that Tyrant Tomb had less emotions. That's why that book didn't make this list. But this book was definitely the strongest of this series so far. And if you have not checked out this series, don't know what you're doing with your life, it's really, really good. But this third book, superb, definitely a 5-star read. Had to make this list. The next book I'm going to chat about is a book that actually has not come out yet. It comes out in March 2020, and it's Wicked as You Wish by Rin Chopra. This is a book that I got at BEA last year, and I had never read anything by her. But I actually loved it. It basically like a fairy tale retelling. Reminded me so much of Storybrooke and Once Upon a Time. But it basically follows this world of characters where they are removed from their town because a snow queen came and put a curse on their town. So they're living in America, in I think it's in Texas or Arizona, and they are just trying to survive, and they're dealing with the aftermath of these things. Found this book to be such a fun, engaging read. Loved it. Really enjoyed it. Now I have to go back and read more by Rin Chopra in the future, but this book was a really standout for me, and it still made my top 10 list, and I read it so early in the year, and I cannot wait for the rest of the world to read it because boy did it impress me. I love the characters, I love the setting, I love the world building, I love the diversity in it. I think the diversity of the tag of, I can never say that culture name, but it was lovely. I really loved it, and I cannot. Now I have to wait I'm going to be waiting literally 2 years for book two. But totally fine by me. I just really, really enjoyed this book. If you're looking for a really unique, diverse fairy tale retelling, would definitely check this out when it comes out in March. The next book I'm going to chat about in this video is The Storm Crow by Kayla Josephine. This was another book that I picked up at BEA, and I wound up meeting her, but I really love this book. Basically, it follows a society where there are storm crows or crows as a part of their magic source, and there is a princess and her older sister and her parents. But when her city is overtaken by a external force, this young girl has to go on an adventure to become the princess that this kingdom needs, and she's on the hunt for the storm crows. I love the political drama in this novel. I love the pacing. I love the characters. I thought it dealt with being a hero and in such an interesting way. Had massive vibes of the Ash Princess series when I first read that a couple of years ago. She's a very different type of hero, but I love the Storm Crows. I think that relationship was perfect, and I really enjoyed it. I saw the cover for the second book in the series, and it's high on my TBR as well. But boy, did this book impress me. I found a new cinnamon roll character to love. But that is why this book made my sense. I love the tropical setting, and I just loved all the characters. So Storm Crow is definitely a high thumbs up for me. The next book I'm going to chat about is no surprise from this author duo, and it is Aurora Rising by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. Space adventure? Check. Fascinating characters? Check. Hilarity and drama? Check. I love this author duo so much. I love their Illuminate series. I love their individual books. But this book was just so snarky. And when you pitch me a book as 11 from Stranger Things, basically in space, I was so there and I tore through this book. I read through it in like 2 days when I was down in Virginia with my cousin. Boy, was it a fast-paced read. I loved it so much. I need Aurora Burning like now, and I'm so excited for it. I love the characters. I love the relationship. I love the dual, like all the various perspectives that we got. I also like the elements of like non-traditional formatting in this book. It wasn't the whole book, but they did have elements that I really did enjoy. Such a standout read. I loved it, and I cannot wait to get my hands on the sequel. I didn't read a lot of science fiction books this year, but this one was one that definitely stood out to me. So, high praise from me. This is a book that really I am surprised I made this list because I didn't love the first book in the series, and I talked about this in my surprising reads category, but again, Legendary by Stephanie Garber blew me out of the water in regards to loving this book as much as I did. This book, instead of following Scarlet, the older sister, it follows Tella, the younger sister, as she goes through Caraval as being the lead protagonist. And I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was like the writing style or the character or the plot. This book was so much more engaging, and I again was on a road trip with my cousin in Virginia, and I like read this in like 2 days again. Another very, very fast read, but really impressed me. I thought the world was so fascinating, and I loved it. I loved it even more than I love Legendary, and it so much so that it made my list. I have finale on my TBR for December. I doubt I'm going to get to it, but I do have it there, and if not, I will definitely read it in 2020. But that is why I love this book so much. I really love Tella as a main character. I loved her. I loved her being my point of view character, and I really loved her relationship with Dante in that book as well. I think that's his name. But yeah, again, such a strong read and one that really captivated me from page one. The next book I'm going to talk about is the third Keeper of the Lost City series. Honestly, they could all make this list because I love all the books, but I was trying to choose the one that really stood out to me, and that is Everblaze by Shadow Messenger. I thoroughly enjoyed the first two books in the series, but I felt like the third book like just took the series to like another level. There was a friendship dynamic in this book that was introduced that I really, really like. This is a very, very big cast of characters, but whoever Sophie was focused on in this book really like made me be a lot more focused, and I really like that. I love the mystery that was in this book. There was a lot of unexpected twists at the end that kind of had me on the edge of my seat. But I just really loved it. I think the series is so great. I'm in the middle of reading Lodestar right now, but I'm just really liking this series, and this was the book that really stood out to me, and that is why I made this list. But this series is one that I'm really enjoying and cannot wait to be caught up by in 2020. So if you're looking for like a middle grade fantasy series that is really, really vast and really, really amazing, this book was one that really, the series is one that stood out to me. But also, I think the world building and the cast of characters and how expansive her world gets is something that you should really look into. I love her characters so much. They all like just put a smile on my face, and I love being with these characters. And I think it really, what this book does is it incorporates so many life issues that I think kids should be aware of, like, diversity, racism, relationships, feelings, best friends, maybe having more feelings for somebody. And I just think it does it in such an effective way, but also one that is so entertaining. It's like Percy Jackson. Percy Jackson really deals with so many important issues in a fun fantasy novel. This series is the exact same way. So that is why Everblaze made this list. The next book I'm going to chat about is the only Sarah J. Maas book to make this list, and that is Tower of Dawn. One of the series that I wound up reading this year, well, finishing, was the Kingdom of Ash series or the Throne of Glass series. But out of all the books in this series, I love Tower of Dawn. I think the reason I love this book so much was it was a small, condensed story and it focused on so few characters, but I grew to adore them. And I love Kale as a main character, and this book was just one that really just knocked me in the emotions, but I just love the pacing. I love the mystery. I love the elements. I love how this book did have a tie-in to like the major story, but I love seeing this through Cal's head. I loved all the new characters we got, and I love how this was a nice setup to Kingdom of Ash. But definitely one of my favorite books in the series by far, and I was really happy that I finally got around to reading it. The next book I'm going to chat about is Annie Sullivan's book, and that is The Tiger Queen. This book I found to be super interesting because even though it's a fantasy novel, there's no real magic present, and I like that. Felt like this fantasy book was a lot about your own power and fighting and, succeeding in that way, and I just loved it. I thought it was one of the few standalones that I read this year that was nice and condensed, and I felt like wrapped up the story in a nice, like, neat bow. And I didn't need anything else, and I just love that. I love the characters. I thought she was such a fun heroine, one that didn't rely on magic but really relied on her own power. I liked the romance. I love all the unexpected political drama that we got. It was just such a fun read. I really enjoyed it, and it was one that really stood out to me, and that is why it made this list. And I really need to read more by Annie Sullivan in the future. The next book I'm going to chat about is one that I have long put off reading, and that is Two Dark Reigns by Kendra Blake. But I'm happy to report that I really wound up liking it. This is the third book in her Queens of Fennbirn series, and I actually wound up really liking this book. But this book was another book that really took this series in a somewhat of a different direction, but I really liked where the story went. And I felt like this book, it was a nice balance between the sisters being adversarial to almost developing a type of friendship, but still remaining true to who they are. And I really like this book. I think Jules is easily becoming one of my favorite characters. This book expanded on a lot of things, and the end was insane. I desperately need to get my hands on Five Dark Fates. I actually have to go to the library and see if it's available, but I didn't get around to going there this weekend. Maybe next weekend. But it's just a book that I love. I love the characters. I love the strong female characters in this book. I think that's a standout. I love the world building, and I just was really impressed with it. And I desperately need to get around to the last book in the series. But it was a book that I was really happy that I finally got around to reading, and it's one that really did impress me, so much so that I'm going to bump up Five Dark Fates on my reading list in 2020. And the last book that I'm going to talk about in this video should be no shock to anyone, and that is Queen of Nothing by Holly Black. This was a book that I've been highly anticipating since last year because I read Wicked King so early. I will admit that this book did not surpass it did not go past my expectations. I think I still like Wicked King a little bit more, but I felt like it was a solid conclusion, and I felt like it did something that some authors have a very hard time doing. It balanced fan desires with storyline telling in a very effective way. I really love how the story wrapped up. I love all the plot stuff. I thought it was very, very interesting. I still have questions, but I'm hoping that we'll get a spin-off series at some point to maybe answer those questions. The one part of this book that I've said a couple of times that I wasn't the biggest fan of was the end villain, who that wound up being, because I didn't think the stakes were as high as I wanted them to be. But I still think it was a solid conclusion and one that definitely deserves to be on this list. I love Jude's path in this story. I especially love the relationship between Taryn and Jude in the story. It was one of the highlights of the series for me. This book was so short, but one packed quite a punch. And it was a book that really, again, stood out to me. Even though I didn't give it 4 stars, it's one that I think widely deserves to be on this list. So, those are all the top 10 science fiction and fantasy reads that impressed me in 2019. Let me know in the comments if any of these books made your list. And I'll talk to you tomorrow for my top 10 non-fantasy or sci-fi reads that really impressed me in 2019. Talk to you guys later. Bye.